Thank you very much for your contribution to this discussion, because clearly we have to have a lot more talk about what's happening in the area of agriculture. But, you know, there are some new areas of potential growth, the way that we use technology, the extent to which we get more Barbadians to be involved in this process. And therefore, I was pleasantly surprised when I saw this piece that said that Alan Emptage invented the world's first search engine, but he didn't earn a single cent from his groundbreaking invention. That latter point didn't impress me at all. What impressed me was that we had a Barbadian who was involved in something as significant as this, and therefore we tracked him down in Canada. That's where he is? Pardon?
New York.
In New York now. He's in New York. And he's on the line with us via Skype. Good afternoon and welcome to Down to Brass Tacks, Alan.
Thanks for having me.
Well, tell us who you are. Many people in Barbados would want to hear that first of all.
I am Alan Emptage. I am born and bred Bajan. My dad is Sir Stephen Emtage, which I think would be familiar, particularly to your more mature listeners, when he was in government for many years.
He was the former Director of Finance and Planning in Barbados.
Right, for 25 years or thereabouts, I believe. I went to Harrison College. I went to school at Harrison College. I'll apologize in advance. We're in the middle of Manhattan here, so it could get noisy at any moment. I'll apologize for that in advance. After going to Harrison College, graduated, got a Barbados scholarship, and went to McGill University to study computer science.
What did you do there? This idea of a search engine, because there are a lot of people who are not familiar with this terminology. So what is a search engine?
A search engine, I mean, the search engine that most people would be familiar with these days would be Google and Bing, those kinds of programs, which allow you to type in a phrase or a word and find relevant results from websites that they consider, an appropriate result to your question. What I did was pre the web, before the web was invented, the major repository for information, for programs, for data, was something called FTP archives, which were just basically what you would think of as a large a directory full of files. I mean, it's the easiest way to describe it, which you could log on to that particular machine with that directory and see what it had and retrieve the files. There was a movement, quite a strong movement at the time. This was the late 80s for people to provide software and other kinds of information on these sites that would allow public access by anybody to go and retrieve the information and use it for your own purposes. And after I graduated from McGill in my undergrad, I stayed on and did a graduate degree, a master's degree, and was part of the School of Computer Science staff that would maintain the machines, run the machines for the school. And part of my job was to locate software, primarily software, for our students and faculty, because like many universities, you have funding for the machines themselves, not the software to run them. And so we were very dependent on public, what we would now call open source software that has been made generally available without a fee. And I was responsible for locating that software and providing it to the staff and the students. And as a result of that, I built a set of programs that allowed me to automate that, so I didn't have to do it manually all the time, go and retrieve the information and store it and search it. And then it became clear that other people had an interest in the information and the program that I had created. And once we announced its general availability, it became a very popular thing back in 1990 when we announced it.
Question is, why didn't you patent it?
That was a conscious choice, actually. That wasn't, a lot of people have, the Huffington Post piece, and one of the things, even though they edited that down from about 4 hours of tape to about 3.5 minutes, one of the things that didn't come across clearly, and that unfortunately was the fact that it wasn't accidental that we didn't patent it. It was a time when before commercial companies were allowed on the internet. People don't remember that prior to about 1992 or thereabouts, I don't remember the exact date, 92, 93, when the National Science Foundation in the United States, which is responsible for education, it ran the internet, and it did not allow commercial entities, other than a few large research companies like IBM and so on. And so, it was not a commercial environment. It's not what the internet has become, which is a very, very commercial environment. It was not a place that you did commerce, number one. And number two, we also made a conscious decision not to patent it because we figured that it might stifle what was a very new and innovative field, that by locking up the intellectual property rights, we would freeze out or freeze research into this area, which was very new and just part of the exploration. People forget that Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who created the World Wide Web, did exactly the same thing. The organization he worked for at the time, CERN in Geneva, where they run the Large Hadron Collider, which has been in the news recently over the whole Higgs boson particle. He developed it there, and both he and CERN specifically relinquished intellectual property rights over the web, so that people could take it and explore it and innovate around it and use it, and it became the most successful program in the world as a result of that, because it didn't come with any constraints.
Now, Alan, you didn't make any money out of it, so I suppose people would ask you, how have you been recognized, if at all, for the work that you did in this regard?
That's a good question. I don't think there's been a lot of formal recognition. I certainly haven't sought any. No, I mean, I get called on talks. I was in India recently giving a talk to a university in India on the subject, and there's a certain amount of web nostalgia going around these days, I've noticed. Next year will be the 25th anniversary of Archie, so therefore the search engine will be 25 years old, and I suspect that's part of people's interest is learning about these things that just seem to exist and don't have a history behind them.
What have you been doing since the early 1990s, the late 1980s?
Well, for many years, up until about 1997, I did a lot of work in standards groups, which doesn't sound particularly exciting, but it was a very interesting field to be in. For example, the URLs that are ubiquitous nowadays, http:// and so on. I was a co-chair of a committee, the standards committee that formalized those. Tim Berners-Lee had created that originally, and we took what Tim had done, and we did a lot of work to make sure that those things were usable and what we call interoperable, so that everybody understood how these things were supposed to be constructed, so that nowadays you can go into any browser and find any website using that URL. That is the result of standardization. Were it not for standardization, you could very well have it sort of split into many different domains that wouldn't be able to interoperate. So from about 1991 or so to 1997, I did a lot of standards work. I started a company back in Montreal, which, as far as we know, is the first company in the world that was set up to market internet services. To say that we didn't make any money off of Archie is not correct, actually. I lived off of Archie for several years. We just didn't live off the intellectual property. We licensed it to universities and corporations and government institutions around the world as a software program, much like Microsoft will license Word or Excel to you. We did the same thing. So I did make some money off of it. I just didn't make billions of dollars off of it. And then in 1997, I moved to New York City. Montreal got a little cold for me, and I moved to New York, and I have been working here with a company called Mediopolis, which is a small boutique web engineering firm, and we build basically high-end websites for people all over the United States and sometimes in Europe, but mostly the United States.
I know that there's some people in the Caribbean who are and outside of the Caribbean, there's a very well-known Barbadian who is at MIT, who's been pushing the concept of trying to get Caribbean children to become more fascinated and involved in the whole concept of science and technology. From where you sit, let's talk a little bit about your background and how you believe that background in Barbados influenced you to be where you are today as an innovator.
Right. Well, my background in science actually was, I think I can ascribe in large part to my mother's aunt. I'm sure many Barbadians will be familiar with what used to be called the Three Sisters, the houses on Bay Street that unfortunately have now fallen down. Well, we're knocked down finally at the corner where the boatyard is. Those houses were my mother's family, the ancestral home, if you want to call it that, of my mom's family. And I spent many of my years growing up there with the Innes aunts, and many Barbadians will remember the Innes ladies as educators. Constance Innes was the headmistress of St. Gabriel's School and worked at Foundation for many years. And she was, in large, I think, very, very much responsible for inciting an interest in science for me from a very early age, waking me up. I remember vividly at 3 o'clock in the morning when I was probably 10 years old to see a comet, and taking me up to the observatory and looking at stars and just basically fostering an image in science. I think that is very, very important. I think schools obviously have their place, but I think particularly in science, which can be seen as dry and boring or difficult, having somebody, it doesn't necessarily mean be a family member, it can be a teacher as well, it can be it can be a next door neighbor, it can be anybody, a friend of the family, who shows you the beauty of science, that shows you the fascination that can come from science and exploration. So I think that was one of the primary reasons I got into science. I often say that computer science was something that I did not go into specifically. I just got there by the process of elimination, of looking at other things, areas of science, and deciding that for one reason or another that wasn't for me, and what was left standing was computer science. I had a phenomenal group of teachers at Harrison College who were truly amazing people. Mr. Prasad, Mr. Hollingsworth, Mr. Halsworth, and I had shared many of the same teachers as my father, actually. Fanny Fields and Captain Hutt, and some of these storied names, Albert Williams, who made these things interesting. They made science something that lived and something that was something to be interested in. It wasn't just equations on a blackboard. It had consequences, and it had a beauty to it. So I think fostering an environment where people feel as if science and technology, I can't imagine how different it would be these days to have the internet, to have those kinds of resources at your fingertips. It's a very, very different world to the world that I grew up in which, the closest you got to that kind of knowledge was basically the Encyclopedia Britannica. There was no that on your phone you could answer pretty much any question that came up. It's answerable within seconds by typing in Google into a Google app on your phone. So I think it's an interesting challenge. I think a community of science is important, where you feel as if you're part of something larger. I think that is easier with the internet because your communities don't have to be restricted to your physical location anymore. And I think somebody asked me the other day, you know, how could Barbados create a community of technology? And I said, well, you know, it has to be seen as valuable. It has to be seen beyond just being a way to make a buck, because a lot of the people who are in this field, you know, the money is nice, it's great, but that's not the primary reason that they're in it. They're in it because it's interesting and because they can make a difference. And fostering a cultural environment that allows people to feel as if it is valued is as important as anything else.
What do you know of why the Huffington Post hunted you down?
They have a little series going on right now. They were looking for people, as they described it to me, they wanted people who you had never heard about but who had changed your life. And I fell into that category. As it turned out, the offices of the filmmakers who are doing this series are a block away from me here in Manhattan, so it made it doubly convenient. But they were looking for, you know, they're doing, I believe they told me they were going to interview the guy who created the digital camera, another unknown name, but who has changed the world. So I think that was their override, that was their theme, and I was just, you know, I fit well into that category.
I hope I can get a couple of calls in. I don't know how the technology is going to work in that regard, but I certainly want to try to see if we can get one or two people who can speak with you directly, because I know there are those who would welcome the opportunity to hear your responses to a couple of their questions. So let's see whether we have somebody like that on the line and whether you can pick them up and they can hear you. This is Down to Brass Tacks. Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Good day, Mr. Ellis.
I'm searching here for somebody who may have more of a question that is relevant to the guy that we have on the line here. Do you have such a question?
Me was Emtage.
Yes.
Well, I heard him speaking. I believe that he was one of the persons who were in Barbados, and Barbados was advanced, and they were very successful. But I would like to ask him, how does he look at Barbados today in this 2013? What his ideas about Barbados and what he thinks that we could be advanced in, and what he could say anything to help the country at this present moment.
Well, I think he's just been doing just that. So let me go to opposition leader Mia Motley as well, because I think along with the discussion that we are having about the economy, I'm well aware that she continues to have a focus on areas such as these, and therefore I'd like to get her involved in this discussion, and then we can move from there back to what she's been discussing today, which is the Barbados economy. When is the last time you were back here in Barbados, Alan?
I try and come back a couple of times a year. I was there at Christmas.
And you jump for crop over?
Very well be there. It coincides with a relative's big birthday, so I'm hoping I can.
So you've never done it. You've never done it so far.
Oh no! Well, when I was younger, when I was younger and more able to have rum at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Rum at 6 in the morning. Rum at 6 o'clock in the morning on Kuduma Day does imply you're jumping with the Blue Boxcar band.
Yes. Yeah, I think you would have. I think.
So for you, the next major step.
Oh, I don't know. I can't think of, I transitioned out of a lot of the research. I transitioned a lot of out of the research area many years ago. That is, as everybody knows, became a massive industry. I believe it's estimated at $780 billion a year now is the search engine industry. It is a completely different industry from when I was involved in it. It's incredibly sophisticated with teams of literally thousands of people working on these things, tens of thousands of people working on these things. So I don't have any great desire to go back into that. I had a wonderful run. It was a great time to be there. I got to work with the pioneers of the internet, people who created the internet itself, as well as people who created the World Wide Web and email and all of these other things. And I some of them become friends, and so I cherish those memories. I have no great desire to relive them. I have more focus nowadays. I have turned my focus more to photography and travel. I love traveling, and about 15 years ago, I took up photography in a more serious way. So I've sort of changed my focus there. I still work with computers, obviously. But they are my hobby. They've always been they're my profession, not my hobby. I don't take them as I don't get a lot of excitement out of computers. They're tools as far as I'm concerned. But I do get a lot of excitement out of traveling and doing interesting things and taking photographs around the world. So that's my main focus these days.
Alan Emptage joining us on Skype, and on the telephone line, opposition leader Mia Motley. We certainly anticipate that she will give us a bit more of her views on what's happening with respect to the Barbados economy, but we want to take this opportunity also to get some thoughts from her on the fact that we have a Barbadian who is so little known but has done such outstanding work that he is being sought after as one of the people who changed the world. Good afternoon, Ms. Motley.
Good afternoon, David. How are you?
I'm well, and you?